The crystal spires of Vexithara Prime stretched toward the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the Grand Council chamber, representatives from across the Galactic Empire sat in judgment of humanity's fate. The air hummed with translation, fields as dozens of alien voices merged into one condemning chorus. "Cowards," hissed Ambassador Zethkri, his serpentine form coiled around the speaking platform. Bioluminescent scales pulsed angry red along his neck. "These humans flee from every real battle. They hide behind their primitive technology and beg for mercy when cornered." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled delegates. The Vorton delegation clicked their mandibles in approval. The crystalline Silmari chimed harmonious notes of contempt. Even the normally neutral Epsilon Collective flickered their consensus lights in agreement. High Counselor Vexthul raised one of her forearms for silence. Her ancient eyes, each the size of dinner plates, surveyed the chamber with the weight of millennia. "The evidence is clear," she rumbled, her voice like grinding stone. "In the Battle of Kepler Station, human forces retreated after losing merely 30% of their fleet. The Rigel incident saw them surrender their entire colony rather than fight to the last being." She gestured to the holographic display floating above the chamber's center. Images of human soldiers filled the space, pale, soft creatures in bulky armor, retreating from superior alien forces. "They lack the warrior spirit," continued Vexthul. "They value individual life over honor. They negotiate when they should fight. They withdraw when they should advance." Her massive head turned toward the human delegation's sealed booth. How can such a species deserve a place among the Empire's warriors? In the soundproof human observation booth, Ambassador Sarah Chen felt her jaw clench. Beside her, General Marcus Webb's weathered face remained impassive, but she could see the storm brewing in his steel-gray eyes. "Ma'am," Webb whispered, his voice barely audible through gritted teeth, "with respect, I think it's time we showed them what Americans do when our backs are against the wall." Chen raised her hand slightly, a gesture that had taken on new meaning in their months of diplomatic humiliation. "Not yet, General. Let them dig their own grave a little deeper." On the main floor, Zethkri's scales now blazed brilliant crimson. "I propose we settle this matter in the traditional way. Let humanity choose their finest warriors for the trial of strength. When they inevitably fail, we can discuss their proper place as a client species rather than equals." The chamber erupted in approval. Alien voices raised in what could only be described as bloodthirsty celebration. For too long they had watched this young species claim territory, negotiate treaties, and demand equal representation. Time to put them in their place. Vexthul's massive form leaned forward. "The trial shall take place on Tarkus 7. Humanity may send 50 of their best warriors. They will face the Crimson Legion, 500 of our most elite soldiers from across the Empire." Her lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing teeth like obsidian daggers. "If the humans can survive for one planetary rotation, we will consider their request for full membership. When they fall within the first hour, they will accept client status and all its limitations." The booth's communication system crackled to life. "Ambassador Chen," came Vexthul's voice, "do you accept these terms?" Sarah stood slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. Around her, the gathered representatives leaned forward in anticipation. They expected begging. They expected negotiation. They expected cowardice. Instead, Ambassador Chen smiled. "We accept," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation fields. "But we have one small request." The chamber fell silent. Even the Silmari stopped their harmonic humming. "Name it," Vexthul rumbled, clearly surprised by the human's confidence. "We'd like to choose the battlefield conditions. Since you're so confident in your superiority, surely you won't object to letting us pick where we make our last stand." Zethkri's scales flickered between colors, confusion replacing anger. "What does it matter? Tarkus 7 has a dozen different biomes. Choose whichever you prefer for your grave." Sarah's smile widened. We'll take the jungle region. Sector 7, if the maps are correct. Nice and dense, lots of trees. Agreed, Vexthul declared, her voice heavy with contempt. The trial begins in 7 standard days. Choose your warriors well, human. They will be your species' last heroes. As the council session ended and representatives began filing out, Sarah turned to General Webb. His expression had changed from storm clouds to something that made her glad they were on the same side. General, she said quietly, I believe it's time to make some calls back home. Webb's grin was sharp as a blade. Yes, ma'am, I know exactly who to call. He paused, looking out at the alien delegates celebrating humanity's apparent doom. Ma'am, do you think we should tell them that Tarkus 7's jungle sector has the same climate and terrain as Southeast Asia? No, General. I think that would spoil the surprise. Sarah gathered her diplomatic materials, moving with practiced efficiency. How long to get our people there? 72 hours for the advance team, full deployment in 5 days. Webb's eyes held a predatory gleam. Should I tell them to pack light? Tell them to pack exactly what they'd pack for a hunting trip in Vietnam. Oh, and General? Sarah paused at the booth's exit. Make sure they bring the good toys. As the human delegation left the chamber, none of the celebrating aliens noticed the small recording device Sarah placed on the communication console. If humanity was about to make history, she wanted it properly documented. Outside the crystal spires, purple lightning split the alien sky, as if the planet itself sensed that something fundamental was about to change in the galaxy's balance of power. Chapter 2. The American Response. 5 days before the trial, deep in the Colorado mountains, a secure facility that didn't exist on any official maps buzzed with controlled chaos. In Conference Room Alpha, men who weren't supposed to exist studied tactical displays of an alien world. Colonel Jack Reaper Morrison set down his coffee mug, black liquid that could probably dissolve tank armor, and looked around the table at his assembled nightmares. These weren't regular soldiers. They were the ones other Special Forces operators whispered about in dark corners of base cantinas. Gentlemen, Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades in America's shadow wars. We have been personally requested by the President to represent humanity in what amounts to a cosmic pissing contest. Staff Sergeant Mike Ghost Kowalski, whose pale blue eyes had seen too much in too many places that didn't appear on maps, raised his hand. Sir, just to be clear, we're going to an alien planet to fight 500 of their best warriors, with just 50 of us? That's correct, Ghost. And they think we're cowards? Apparently. Ghost leaned back in his chair and laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Sir, do they know what Americans did to the last group that underestimated us? Because I'm pretty sure we've got museums full of their equipment. Around the table, grins spread, like wildfire. These men had earned their reputations in places where civilized rules didn't apply. Afghanistan caves where enemy fighters thought terrain made them invincible. Colombian jungles where cartel armies outnumbered them 50-1. Syrian cities where every shadow could hide death. Master Sergeant Carlos Spider Rodriguez, whose specialty in psychological warfare had broken enemy units without firing a shot, spoke up. Sir, what's the terrain like? Morrison activated the holographic display. Tarkus 7 materialized in 3 dimensions, its jungle sector highlighted in green. Dense tropical forest, high humidity, multiple canopy levels, limited sight lines. He paused, letting them absorb the information. Ring any bells? The room went quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then Sergeant First Class Tommy Swamp Rat Boudreaux, who had earned his nickname in Louisiana bayous before perfecting his skills in Southeast Asian conflicts, started chuckling. Sir, Swamp Rat said in his thick Kaju accent, are you telling me these space lizards picked jungle warfare against Americans? It appears so. And they've never fought humans before? Correct. Swamp Rat's chuckle became a full laugh. Sir, with all due respect, somebody needs to tell these aliens about Vietnam, Colombia, and every other jungle where we've turned trees into graveyards. Captain Luis Phantom Vasquez, whose expertise in unconventional warfare had made him a legend in Central American operations, leaned forward. "What's their standard tactics, sir?" Morrison brought up intelligence files gathered by human observers over the past year. "Overwhelming force, direct assault, honor-based combat. They consider ambush tactics cowardly and avoid stealth operations." He paused for effect. "They fight stand-up battles in formation." The silence that followed was profound. These men had spent their careers perfecting the art of making the impossible possible through stealth, cunning, and pure American stubbornness. Lieutenant Daniel Viper Kim, whose fluency in 17 languages and expertise in sabotage had made him invaluable in covert operations, spoke carefully. "Sir, are you telling me they consider our standard operating procedures dishonorable?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." Viper's expression didn't change, but his eyes went dead flat, the look that had been the last thing many enemy commanders ever saw. "Roger that, sir." Morrison stood and walked to a secure cabinet. Inside were files marked with classifications that would make civilian intelligence analysts weep. "Gentlemen, let me introduce you to Operation Boogeymen. Our mission is simple: survive for 24 hours against overwhelming odds while demonstrating that humanity deserves respect in this galactic community." He placed a thick folder on the table. "However, the President has made it clear that merely surviving isn't enough. We need to make a statement that will echo across every alien world in the Empire. A statement that says when you threaten America, when you call Americans cowards, when you underestimate what we're capable of." He opened the folder, revealing detailed plans that made grown Special Operations veterans whistle in appreciation. "You get the full American experience." Staff Sergeant Jerome Smoke Washington, whose expertise in explosives had earned him the grudging respect of enemy sappers across 3 continents, examined the plans with professional interest. "Sir, I count enough C4 requisitions here to level a small mountain. The jungle canopy on Tarkus 7th averages 200 feet in height," Morrison replied matter-of-factly. "We're going to use that to our advantage." Master Chief Petty Officer Robert Kraken O'Sullivan, on loan from the Navy SEALs for his expertise in amphibious operations and close-quarters combat, studied the planet's hydrology reports. Multiple river systems, natural choke points, and what appears to be a cave network. His Irish-American brogue carried satisfaction. "Sir, this is starting to look like a turkey shoot." Morrison smiled, an expression that had preceded the downfall of enemy regimes. "Gentlemen, in 48 hours we deploy to Tarkus the 7th. Our alien friends are expecting 50 frightened humans who will beg for mercy within the first hour." He closed the folder with a decisive snap. "Instead, they're going to get 50 Americans who've been personally insulted." Sergeant Major William Reaper Thompson, whose reputation in long-range reconnaissance had made him a living legend among scout snipers, spoke quietly. "Sir, what are the rules of engagement?" Morrison's smile turned predatory. "The aliens consider this a trial of strength to determine humanity's worthiness. They expect a fair fight." He paused, savoring the moment. Fortunately, Americans have never been particularly interested in fighting fair. The room erupted in controlled laughter, the kind of sound that had preceded some of history's most spectacular underdog victories. "Equipment manifest is in your packets," Morrison continued. "We're authorized to bring anything that fits in our standard deployment parameters. Use your imagination, but remember, we need to make this educational for our audience." As the briefing concluded and the operators began studying their individual assignments, Morrison caught Ghost's attention. "Sergeant, a word?" After the others filed out, Morrison handed Ghost a special communication device. "You'll be our primary liaison with command during the operation. But there's something I want you to understand. This isn't just about surviving or even winning. This is about making sure that no alien species ever again makes the mistake of calling Americans cowards." Ghost hefted the device, its weight familiar in his hands. "Sir, my grandfather fought in the Pacific, my father in Vietnam, my brother in Iraq." He looked up, his pale eyes holding depths of history. They all came home with stories about what happens when people underestimate Americans. Should I add another chapter to that book? Morrison clapped him on the shoulder. Sergeant, I want you to write the whole damn epilogue. As Ghost left to begin final preparations, Morrison remained alone in the conference room, staring at the holographic image of Tarkus 7. Somewhere on that alien world, 500 of the galaxy's finest warriors were preparing for what they believed would be a simple demonstration of human weakness. They had no idea they were about to receive a master class in why Americans had never lost a war when the gloves came off. Chapter 3. The hunt begins. Tarkus 7's primary sun cast long shadows through the dense jungle canopy as the Crimson Legion made their final preparations. 500 warriors from across the Galactic Empire stood in perfect formation on the designated landing field, their armor gleaming in the alien sunlight. Commander Zarthek of the Vortan hegemony, his exoskeleton polished to mirror brightness, addressed his assembled forces. His mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he surveyed the massed ranks of the Empire's finest. Vortan shock troopers, their natural armor enhanced with military-grade plating. Silmari crystal warriors, their bodies humming with harmonic weapons. Zephyri aerial combat specialists, their wings folded but ready for rapid deployment. Today, Zarthek announced, his voice carrying across the formation, we demonstrate the futility of human ambition. These soft creatures believe they can stand among warriors. We will show them the price of such arrogance. A ripple of approval passed through the assembled legion. They had studied human military history, primitive conflicts on a single world, wars fought with chemical explosives and kinetic weapons, barbaric, but hardly threatening to beings who had conquered star systems. Captain Velshar of the Crimson Guard, whose unit had pacified 3 rebellious sectors, stepped forward. Commander, our intelligence suggests the humans will attempt to hide in the jungle canopy. Standard search and destroy protocols should flush them out within the first hour. Agreed, Zarthek replied. We advance in standard formation. Overwhelming force. No survivors. He paused, his compound eyes reflecting cruel amusement. Though perhaps we allow a few to live long enough to broadcast their species' humiliation. 20 kilometers away, concealed in the jungle's green depths, 50 Americans had been listening to every word through surveillance equipment that didn't officially exist. The aliens' communication frequencies had been compromised within 6 hours of the human arrival. Well, Ghost whispered into his throat mic, they certainly seem confident. Morrison's response crackled through the communications net. Confidence is good, Ghost. Overconfidence is better. All units report status. The responses came in sequence, each team leader confirming their positions with clinical efficiency. Team Alpha had established overwatch positions in the upper canopy. Team Bravo controlled the river crossing points. Team Charlie held the cave networks. Team Delta waited in the killing fields they had spent 2 days preparing. Phantom, Morrison's voice continued. What's the psychological assessment? Captain Vasquez's voice carried grim satisfaction. Sir, they're treating this like a parade ground exercise. Standard formations, predictable tactics, and they're broadcasting their positions on open channels. He paused. Sir, I don't think they understand the concept of asymmetric warfare. Copy that, Phantom. Spider, are your presents ready? Master. Sergeant Rodriguez's chuckle was barely audible. Sir, our alien friends are about to discover why humans developed psychological warfare as an art form. All speakers are positioned and ready. In the jungle around the American positions, carefully concealed equipment waited for activation. Motion sensors, audio surveillance, speakers that would soon fill the alien air with sounds designed to break the minds of overconfident warriors. Smoke, Morrison continued. Are the fireworks ready? Staff Sergeant Washington's response carried professional pride. Sir, I've turned this jungle into the world's largest controlled demolition site. On your command, we can redraw the map of this entire sector. Outstanding. Kraken, how are our underwater highways? Master Chief O'Sullivan's voice held anticipation. Sir, the river systems are prepped for rapid movement. If we need to relocate fast, we can move a full team 2 clicks underwater without surfacing. Morrison felt the familiar calm that preceded violence settle over him. Around the jungle, his men waited with the patience of apex predators. Gentlemen, remember, we're not just fighting for survival, we're fighting for respect. Every alien, world in the Empire is watching this feed. Let's give them something to remember. The communication net went silent as 500 alien warriors began their advance into the jungle. Their movements were textbook perfect, coordinated, overwhelming, designed to crush resistance through superior numbers and firepower. They had no idea they were walking into the largest natural ambush site in galactic history. High above in the canopy, Sergeant First Class Maria Hawk Santos adjusted her scope and watched the alien formation through thermal imaging. Beside her, Corporal David Arrow Chen calculated wind speed and bullet drop for shots that would need to be perfect. "Hawk to all units," she whispered. "I count 500 hostiles advancing in 3 columns. They're staying in formation, maintaining communication discipline, and showing no awareness of our positions." "Copy, Hawk," Morrison replied. "Remember, we're not trying to win through attrition. We're here to teach a lesson. Let them come." 2 kilometers from the American positions, the Crimson Legion continued their advance. Zarthek felt satisfaction as his forces moved through the jungle with textbook precision. These humans had chosen their gravesite well. Dense cover that would muffle their screams and hide their shame from galactic observers. "First contact in approximately 10 minutes, reported Captain Velshar. "Thermal scans show no significant heat signatures. The humans may have already fled." "Maintain advance," Zarthek ordered. "If they have run, we will hunt them down like the prey animals they are." 5 minutes later, the first Vortan shock trooper triggered a motion sensor hidden in the jungle undergrowth. The device was smaller than a coin, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look, and networked to every American position. "Contact," Ghost whispered into his mic. "Tripwire Alpha activated. They're entering the maze." The maze was Morrison's, term for the kill zone they had spent 2 days preparing. Every tree, every rock, every shadow had been mapped and turned into a weapon. Sight lines had been cleared for sniper positions. Explosives had been placed at precise locations. Escape routes had been prepared and rehearsed. Most importantly, psychological warfare equipment had been positioned to turn the jungle itself into an enemy. "Execute Phase 1, Morrison ordered. In the trees above the advancing aliens, speakers activated with sounds that had broken enemy morale on a dozen worlds. The jungle filled with whispers in languages the aliens didn't recognize, voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Ghostly laughter echoed between the trees. The sound of human children singing nursery rhymes in minor keys drifted through the air like auditory poison. The effect on the Crimson Legion was immediate. Warriors who had conquered star systems found themselves looking over their shoulders at sounds that shouldn't exist. The perfect formation began to waver as soldiers unconsciously moved closer together. "What is this?" demanded Captain Velshar, his voice carrying the first note of uncertainty. "Psychological warfare," Zarthek replied, but his mandibles clicked, with nervousness. "Primitive human tactics, ignore it." But ignore it they could not. The sounds grew stronger, more disturbing. Recordings of battles from human history mixed with alien languages speaking words of defeat and despair. The jungle itself seemed to mock their advance. High in the canopy, Spider Rodriguez smiled as he monitored the aliens' communications. Their chatter was increasing, always a sign of growing anxiety. Fear was a virus and he was patient zero. "Phase 2, Morrison ordered. The snipers opened fire. Not to kill, that would come later. Instead, they targeted equipment. Communication arrays sparked and died. Weapon systems failed as precision shots destroyed crucial components. Leaders found their command and control systems failing one by one. "Contact!" shouted a Zephyri aerial scout as his wing-mounted weapons exploded from an impossibly distant shot. "Sniper fire from unknown positions." Panic began to spread through the ranks as more equipment failures cascaded through the formation. These weren't random shots, they were surgical strikes designed to blind and isolate the alien forces. "Return fire," Zarthek ordered. But return fire at what? Muzzle flashes appeared and disappeared like phantoms. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, ghosts in the green maze they had made of the jungle. In the trees, Hawk Santos shifted to her third position, leaving behind nothing but empty air where alien sensors had briefly detected heat signatures. 2 kilometers away, Arrow Chen disappeared into a camouflage spider hole that didn't exist on any map. Phase 3, Morrison whispered. The jungle exploded. Smoke Washington's carefully placed charges detonated in sequence, turning massive trees into falling weapons. The alien formation found itself split into isolated groups as the forest canopy crashed down around them. Escape routes were cut off, communication lines were severed. The overwhelming force had become dozens of small, confused units. Report, Zarthek demanded, but his communication system crackled with static and screams. That's when the Americans attacked. They came from everywhere at once, shadows that materialized from the jungle floor, phantoms that dropped from the canopy, demons that rose from river water like avenging spirits. They moved through the maze they had created with lethal efficiency, striking at isolated alien units before vanishing back into the green hell they had made. Ghost materialized behind a group of Silmari crystal warriors, his suppressed weapon, speaking quietly as harmonic beings discovered that their crystalline bodies could shatter from precise kinetic impacts. Before they could turn to face him, he was gone, leaving only echoes and crystal fragments. Swamp Rat emerged from a camouflaged position that had been invisible even to alien sensors, his shotgun turning a Vortan shock trooper's natural armor into expensive confetti. He disappeared back into the undergrowth before the alien squad mates could locate the source of the attack. Viper appeared in the middle of an alien command group like a lethal magic trick, his knife work so fast it seemed like sleight of hand. By the time the aliens realized their commander was down, Viper was already melting back into shadows that shouldn't have been able to hide a human form. "This is impossible," Captain Velshar screamed into his failing communication system. "They're everywhere. How can 50 beings be everywhere at once?" From his concealed command position, Morrison listened to the alien communications deteriorate into chaos and fear. His boys were doing exactly what they had trained for, turning a disadvantageous situation into a nightmare for anyone stupid enough to underestimate American ingenuity. "All units," he spoke calmly into his mic. "Remember, we have an audience. Make it educational." The Americans had been fighting for 30 minutes. They had exactly 23.5 hours to finish teaching the galaxy what happened when you called Americans cowards. The lesson was just getting started. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. 18 hours into the trial, Commander Zarthek crouched in the ruins of what had once been his mobile command center. Around him the jungle burned with alien fire and human ingenuity. His perfect formation of 500 warriors had been reduced to scattered groups of survivors who jumped at shadows and spoke in whispers about demons in the trees. "Status report," he demanded, his voice hoarse from breathing smoke and fear. "Captain." Velshar's image flickered on the damaged communication screen, his exoskeleton cracked and his compound eyes wide with something that might have been madness. "Sir, we've lost contact with 70% of our forces. The humans. They're not fighting like warriors. They're fighting like what?" Zarthek snapped. "Like nightmares, sir." Through the smoke and chaos, the psychological warfare continued. Human voices drifted through the jungle speaking alien languages they shouldn't know, reciting the names of dead warriors, whispering the fears that each species held deepest in their hearts. The Americans had somehow learned the private terrors of beings from across the galaxy and turned them into weapons. Spider Rodriguez monitored the enemy communications from his concealed position, a predatory smile playing across his scarred features. 20 years of breaking enemy morale in Earth's worst hellholes had prepared him for this moment. He keyed his throat mic. "Reaper, this is Spider. Enemy psychological cohesion is at 30% and falling. Recommend Phase 4 initiation." Morrison's response came immediately. "Execute Phase 4. All units, it's time for the finale." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The Americans emerged from concealment. But they didn't attack. Instead, they positioned themselves in a perfect circle around the surviving alien forces, just visible enough to be seen, but far enough away to seem untouchable. 50 humans, standing in the jungle they had turned into their personal kingdom of shadows. "Attention, Crimson Legion." Morrison's voice echoed through speakers hidden throughout the jungle. He spoke in perfect galactic standard, his words carrying to every surviving alien warrior, and to the billions watching the trial's broadcast. "You called humanity cowards. You demanded a trial of strength. You have received both." Zarthek's remaining forces clustered together in a defensive formation, their weapons trained on the surrounding Americans. But for the first time in 18 hours, the shooting had stopped. "I am Colonel Jack Morrison of the United States Army Special Operations Command," Morrison continued, his voice calm and professional. "My men and I represent a species you have declared unworthy of membership in your galactic community. Through the jungle, alien survivors listened with growing horror to words that would reshape their understanding of warfare. You fight with honor, following rules that make sense to civilized beings. You advance in formation. You announce your intentions. You treat warfare as a contest between equals." Morrison paused, letting his words sink in. "These are admirable qualities. They are also why you are about to lose." Ghost materialized from shadows that shouldn't have been able to hide a man, his pale eyes reflecting the alien firelight like those of a hunting wolf. Around the perimeter, other Americans became visible, not emerging from hiding, but simply allowing themselves to be seen. The psychological impact was devastating. "You see, there's something you should understand about humans," Morrison's voice continued. "We are not honorable. We are not fair. We do not fight by your rules." His words carried the weight of history. "We are the species that turned warfare into an art form. We are the beings who learned to make our enemies afraid of the dark." "Captain." Velshar's mandibles clicked in terror as he recognized the tactical situation. The humans had positioned themselves perfectly. Any attempt to break out would require the aliens to cross killing fields that had been prepared for exactly that purpose. They were trapped in a prison made of shadows and fear. "For 18 hours, Morrison continued, you have experienced what humans call asymmetric warfare. You brought 500 warriors to fight 50. You brought overwhelming firepower to fight superior tactics. You brought honor to fight desperation." In the upper canopy, Hawk Santos adjusted her scope, painting targets with invisible lasers while calculating angles of fire that would turn any escape attempt into a shooting gallery. She spoke softly into her mic. "All Overwatch positions reporting clear fields of fire. Fish in a barrel, sir." "The trial required us to survive for 24 hours, Morrison announced. "We have 6 hours remaining. You have perhaps 50 warriors left alive." His voice carried grim satisfaction. But that was never really the point, was it? Through the communication network, every alien survivor heard the sounds of American laughter. Not cruel, but confident. The laughter of apex predators who had just finished playing with their food. The point was to determine whether humanity deserves respect in your galactic community. "So let me ask you, Commander Zarthek, do you still consider humans to be cowards?" Zarthek's response was barely audible. "No." "I'm sorry, Commander. Could you repeat that for our galactic audience?" "No," Zarthek said more loudly, his voice carrying defeat and newfound respect. "Humans are not cowards. Thank you for that assessment. Now, since we have 6 hours remaining in our trial, I'm going to offer you a choice." Morrison's voice took on the tone of a professor delivering a lecture. "You can continue fighting. My men have prepared several more hours of educational experiences for you. Or you can surrender and spend the remaining time learning why Americans have never lost a war when our national survival was at stake." The jungle fell silent except for the crackling of fires and the distant sounds of alien breathing. "What do you propose?" Zarthek asked finally. "Safe passage to your landing zone, medical treatment for your wounded, and a conversation about what you've learned here today." Morrison paused. "In exchange, you acknowledge that humanity has passed your trial of strength. And if we refuse?" Ghost's voice came from the darkness, carrying the weight of 3 decades in America's shadow wars. Sir, with all due respect, you really don't want to find out what Phase 5 looks like. Commander Zarthek looked around at his surviving warriors, beings who had conquered star systems and crushed rebellions, now huddled together like frightened children in a nightmare made of trees and shadows. He thought of the hundreds who had died not in glorious battle, but picked off one by an enemy that refused to stand and fight like civilized beings. He thought of home, and of the reports he would have to write explaining how 50 humans had systematically destroyed the Empire's finest military formation. We surrender, he said quietly. Excellent choice, Morrison replied. All American units, weapons safe. Phase 5 is cancelled. There was satisfaction in his voice. Welcome to Earth diplomacy, Commander. Let's talk. As the Americans began emerging from positions that had been invisible even to sophisticated alien sensors, the survivors of the Crimson Legion finally understood what they had encountered. These weren't just warriors. They were the evolutionary result of a species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of making war. Watching from orbit, representatives of the Galactic Empire observed in stunned silence as 50 humans efficiently processed 500 of the galaxy's finest warriors like a military exercise. The casual competence was more terrifying than the violence had been. In the jungle clearing that had become both classroom and graveyard, Colonel Morrison began the conversation that would reshape humanity's place in galactic society. But that conversation would have to wait. First, he had some phone calls to make. The president would want a full briefing, and the Joint Chiefs would want to know if they needed to start preparing for a larger war. Most importantly, he needed to call his wife and tell her he'd be home for dinner next week as scheduled. After all, the mission had been a complete success. Epilogue: The New Reality. 6 months after the trial of Tarkus 7. The Galactic Council chamber looked exactly the same as it had before the trial, but everything had changed. The crystal spires still reached toward purple skies, the translation field still hummed with alien voices, and representatives from across the Empire still gathered to debate the fate of worlds. But now, when they spoke of humanity, they spoke in whispers. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in what was no longer the human observation booth, but rather humanity's official seat on the Galactic Council. The change in seating arrangements was small but significant. Humans were no longer petitioners, seeking admission but equals demanding respect. The motion before us today, announced High Counselor Vexthal, her ancient voice carrying new undertones of caution, concerns the territorial dispute between the Zephyri Confederation and the Rigel Colonial Alliance. Around the chamber, alien representatives shifted uncomfortably. 6 months ago, such disputes were settled through demonstrations of military strength or economic pressure. Now, every territorial conflict carried the shadow of Tarkus 7. Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Zethkri, his scales a carefully neutral, blue-green, we should invite the human representative to mediate this dispute. The suggestion would have been unthinkable before the trial. Now it seemed like simple common sense. If humans could turn 50 warriors into a force that destroyed 500 of the Empire's finest, what could they do with proper military support? Sarah stood gracefully, her movements carrying the confidence of a species that had proven its worth in the most definitive way possible. The United Earth government would be honored to facilitate negotiations between both parties. What she didn't mention was that General Webb's diplomatic advisors were already en route to the disputed system. The galaxy was learning that human mediation came with very effective enforcement mechanisms. On Earth, the impact of Tarkus 7 had been equally profound. The footage of 50 Americans systematically dismantling a galactic military formation had become the most watched video in human history. Recruitment offices couldn't process applications fast enough. Military budgets that had been stagnant for decades suddenly found unlimited funding. In a secure briefing room deep beneath the Pentagon, Colonel Morrison, now General Morrison, addressed a room full of officers who would be leading humanity's expansion into galactic affairs. Gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had personally reshaped interstellar politics. 6 months ago, the galaxy considered us cowards. Today, 3 alien species have requested military training partnerships, 12 worlds have applied for human protection, and the Galactic Empire has officially redesignated Earth as a strategic partner with specialized capabilities. Around the table, officers who had spent their careers fighting Earth's wars now faced the prospect of teaching aliens how Americans made war. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. What they're really asking for, continued Morrison, is to learn how we think. How 50 humans turned a trial of strength into a master class in asymmetric warfare. How we took their concept of honorable combat and showed them why honor is a luxury you can't afford when your species' survival is at stake. Colonel Sarah Valkyrie Peterson, recently assigned to the new Galactic Military Liaison Division, raised her hand. Sir, what's our official policy on sharing tactics with alien forces? Morrison's smile was sharp. We teach them enough to make them effective allies. We keep enough secrets to ensure they never forget who the teachers are. He activated a holographic display showing current galactic political alignments. The balance of power has shifted dramatically. The Empire's military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and superior numbers. We've proven that superior tactics and psychological warfare can neutralize those advantages. His display showed red zones marking areas of galactic instability. Since Tarkus 7, several client species had begun questioning their subordinate status. The demonstration of human military effectiveness had inspired rebellions that the Empire was struggling to contain. The Empire is facing the same problem every hegemon faces when a new player changes the rules, Morrison explained. They can't go back to their old methods because everyone has seen those methods fail. They can't adopt our methods because they don't understand how we think. So they're caught between traditional tactics that no longer work and innovations they can't implement. Meanwhile, on Vexthera Prime, High Counselor Vexthul convened an emergency session of the Empire's military leadership. In the same chamber where humanity had been dismissed as cowardly, alien generals now struggled with the implications of human military doctrine. Commander Zarthek, Vexthul addressed the Vortan officer who had survived Tarkus VII. Your report on human tactics has been illuminating. Zarthek's exoskeleton still bore scars from the jungle trial. His mandibles clicked nervously as he addressed the assembly. High Counselor, the humans don't fight wars. They fight campaigns of psychological destruction designed to break their enemy's will to resist. He activated a tactical display showing the progression of the Tarkus 7 engagement. They turned the jungle itself into a weapon. Every tree, every shadow, every sound became part of their assault on our forces' morale. By the time we realized we were facing a coordinated psychological warfare campaign, our unit cohesion had already collapsed. General Kethmore of the Crystal, Legions leaned forward, his crystalline form chiming with agitation. You're describing terrorism, not warfare. No, Zarthek replied firmly. Terrorism seeks to create fear for political purposes. The humans created fear to achieve specific military objectives. They isolated our units, disrupted our communications, and eliminated our leadership structure. The psychological component was simply the most efficient method of achieving those goals. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For millennia, the Empire's military had dominated through superior technology and overwhelming force. The concept of using an enemy's own psychology against them was not just alien. It was revolutionary. What do you recommend? Vexthul asked. Negotiation, Zarthek replied without hesitation. The humans have demonstrated that they can project force far beyond their apparent capabilities. More importantly, they've shown that they can adapt their tactics to exploit any opponent's weaknesses. He paused, his compound eyes reflecting resignation. We classified them as cowards because they withdrew from disadvantageous engagements. We failed to realize they were simply choosing when and where to fight. Back on Tarkus VII, the jungle had become a pilgrimage site. Alien military officers from across the galaxy arrived daily to study the battlefield where 50 humans had redefined modern warfare. Tour guides, mostly retired alien veterans, pointed out the positions where American snipers had eliminated entire squads without being detected. The most popular stop was the clearing where Colonel Morrison had delivered his final ultimatum. A monument now stood there, inscribed in Galactic standard with words that had become legendary. Honor is admirable, victory is essential, choose accordingly. Ghost, who had returned to Earth but maintained contact with alien military observers, received weekly requests for interviews about American tactical doctrine. His standard response had become famous across the galaxy. We don't fight fair, we fight to win. There's a difference. The psychological impact extended far beyond military circles. Alien civilian populations that had viewed humans as primitive, backwater dwellers now watched Earth's cultural exports with new interest. Human movies about warfare became bestsellers on alien worlds. Military history books topped galactic bestseller lists. Children's toys depicting American soldiers became popular items in alien markets. Perhaps most significantly, the concept of asymmetric warfare began spreading throughout the galaxy. Client species under imperial rule started studying human military history, looking for applicable lessons. The Empire found itself facing insurgencies that employed tactics straight out of Earth's military academies. In the Outer Rim territories, a rebellion on Kepler's world successfully resisted Imperial forces, using modified human guerrilla tactics. On Proxima Station, dock workers organized a strike using psychological warfare techniques learned from studying Tarkus 7th. The ripple effects of 50 Americans' jungle lesson were reshaping galactic politics. 3 months after Tarkus 7th, Ambassador Chen received a formal request from the Galactic Empire for military consultation services. The species that had called humans cowards now wanted to hire them as military advisors. Chen's response was diplomatically worded, but carried unmistakable undertones. The United Earth government would be happy to discuss terms for a comprehensive military partnership. We should note that our consulting fees have increased significantly since our recent demonstration of capabilities. The fee structure was simple: full technology sharing agreements, territorial concessions, and formal recognition of human sovereignty over all systems within 50 light-years of Earth. The Empire agreed within 48 hours. As Sarah Chen prepared for another day of galactic diplomacy, she reflected on how dramatically the situation had changed. 6 months ago, humanity had been a petitioner seeking basic recognition. Today, they were partners in a galactic government that couldn't function without their participation. The transformation hadn't come through economic development or technological advancement. It had come through 50 Americans demonstrating that when you underestimate someone's capabilities, you might find yourself receiving a very expensive education. Her secure communicator chimed with an incoming message from General Morrison. Ma'am, we've received formal requests from 6 alien species asking for training in human-style military operations. How should we respond? Chen smiled as she composed her reply. Tell them we're always happy to teach, but remind them that the tuition is expensive and the curriculum can be intensive. Outside her office window, alien ships arrived and departed from Earth's orbital stations with increasing frequency. Each one carried diplomats, military observers, or trade representatives eager to establish closer ties with the species that had proven conventional wisdom wrong in the most decisive way possible. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson on Tarkus 7th. Americans might be many things, but cowards wasn't one of them. More importantly, they had learned that underestimating humanity was a mistake you only made once. In the jungle where it all began, alien tour guides continued telling the story of 50 humans who had changed galactic history. But they always ended their presentations with the same warning. Remember, this was just a demonstration. They were being polite. The galaxy had no desire to see what Americans looked like when they weren't trying to be diplomatic. And in secure facilities across Earth, military planners worked on contingency plans for conflicts that might require less restraint than the Tarkus 7 demonstration. After all, the galaxy was a big place and not everyone learned lessons the first time they were taught. But that, as they say, would be another story entirely. End.